President Trump is facing his first international crisis, and we now know he will not hesitate to use military force to send a dramatic message to Syria's President Bashar Assad.
Sisters and brothers, I've been seeing number 7 for the last few days.
Made it much harder for Syria's president to use chemical weapons on his own people. U.S. warships in the Mediterranean Sea launched 59 missiles. They pounded an air base in western Syria. The first video in from the scene shows significant damage from the missile attack.
59 missiles.
His decision late last night.
Tonight I ordered a targeted military strike on the airfield in Syria from where the chemical attack was launched.
Margaret Brennan
We're in trouble, sisters and brothers.
Holly Williams is in Turkey, but we begin with David Martin. He's at the Pentagon. David, good morning.
Good morning. The U.S. tried to avoid causing casualties, but there are reports of several dead following the early morning strike. The Pentagon is still assessing the damage, but believes it knocked the base out of commission. A Pentagon spokesman said there is no need for further strikes unless Syria once again resorts to chemical weapons. Nearly 60 cruise missiles thundered toward a Syrian airbase just 3 days after the regime used chemical weapons in an attack against its own people. Tomahawk land attack missiles launched from 2 destroyers, the USS Porter and USS Ross, located in the eastern Mediterranean Sea. The strike targeted Shayrat airfield, believed to be the takeoff point of the plane that dropped the lethal gas on a Syrian village, killing and injuring hundreds. Video from Russian and Syrian state TV provided footage of the aftermath of the attack. The missiles hit aircraft, ammunition depots, air defense systems, and air traffic control radars. The Pentagon said the attack was successful and has rendered the airfield unusable. Prior to 2013, the base, located about 50 miles due south of the location of the gas attack, had been used to store chemical weapons. But the U.S. did not target areas where remaining weapons might be stored. The strike comes 3.5 years after former President Barack Obama threatened military action against the Assad regime.
A red line for us is we start seeing a whole bunch of chemical weapons moving around or being utilized.
But despite threatening airstrikes,
the purpose of this strike would be to deter Assad from using chemical weapons.
President Obama backed off after Syrian President Bashar al-Assad promised to hand over his stockpile of chemical weapons. A promise this week's attack indicates the dictator did not keep. Russian personnel were located at the base, but the U.S. gave Russia advance warning of the strike, and the missiles did not target areas where they were believed to be living. Still, Russia's President Putin is an ally of Assad, and the strike will almost certainly damage U.S.-Russian relations. Nora?
All right, David, thank you. The missiles, a sudden shift by the Trump administration. The president said for years that the U.S. should not take military action against Syria's government. And Secretary of State Rex Tillerson said just last week that Syria's people will decide the future of President Assad. Margaret Brennan is in Palm Beach, Florida, where President Trump is meeting with China's leader again today. Margaret, good morning.
Good morning. Well, President Trump has shown he is willing to use at least limited military action to enforce that red line against chemical weapons first drawn by his predecessor. The Trump administration believes that Bashar al-Assad has used sarin gas in at least 3 attacks over the past 2 weeks.
Assad choked out the lives of helpless men, women, and children.
In a late evening statement, President Trump said the images of small children choking to death on poison gas moved him to action.
It was a slow and brutal death for so many. Even beautiful babies were cruelly murdered.
The decision to strike was made after the president arrived Thursday in Palm Beach for a summit with Chinese President Xi Jinping. Before their dinner, Mr. Trump consulted with National Security Advisor H.R. McMaster and Defense Secretary Mattis. Shortly after the meal, the strikes commenced. The president first publicly indicated he was considering action following Wednesday's meeting with Jordan's king. The president worried that toxic agents could end up in terrorists and use that threat as justification for striking without the permission of Congress.
It is vital national security interest of the United States to prevent and deter the spread and use of deadly chemical weapons.
Notice his red
Secretary
tie.
of State Rex Tillerson said the sarin gas attacks were a clear violation of the 2013 diplomatic deal that Russia and the U.S. brokered to have Syria hand over its chemical stockpile. He said after President Obama had turned a blind eye to Assad's repeated violations, inaction in Syria was not an option for President Trump.
Previous attempts at changing Assad's behavior have all failed and failed very dramatically.
Now, these Syria strikes may help China's President Xi Jinping to gauge Mr. Trump's willingness to act against nuclear-armed North Korea. Those two leaders meet today. And, Gail, next week, Secretary Tillerson flies to Moscow, where he is expected to discuss Syria with Vladimir Putin.
Should be quite a meeting. Thank you very much, Margaret. Syria against the U.S. missile attack. Holly Williams is in Istanbul, Turkey, with a global reaction. Holly, good morning.
Good morning. There are no surprises at all in the responses from the Syrian regime, as well as its ally and backer, Russia. The Syrian regime called the strikes on Shirat Air Base an act of blatant aggression this morning and said it made the U.S. a partner with ISIS and other terrorist groups. Russia says the strikes violate international law based on a, quote, trumped-up pretext. Remember, both the regime and Russia have denied that there was a chemical attack on the town of Han Shaihoun on Tuesday, despite all of the evidence we've seen emerging since then. American allies, including the United Kingdom, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, and Israel, support these strikes. Here in Turkey, they're even calling for more action with a no-fly zone in northern Syria. We spoke with several Syrian rebel groups last night, very happy to see U.S. military action against the Syrian regime because they hope it'll stop the regime from bombing them. Charlie.
Thanks, Holly. Republican Senator Marco Rubio. Good morning, Charlie. You have said.
Notice he has a red tie.
The question is, where does it go from here?
And he has a red tie.
Well, that's a great question. It's an important one. I think ultimately, I hope that the moment has arrived where in the White House and the administration, and I believe this is the case, realize that as long as Bashar al-Assad is there, you're going to have ISIS or you're going to have al-Nusra or some other radical element. Because his very presence and after the crimes he's committed against his own people, there will always be a radical element fighting against him until he is removed from power. And what are the risks? Well, I think the risks are an escalation. We don't know what the Russians are going to do in response. So far, it seems pretty measured. But I certainly think that if there's an effort to remove Assad, they're going to get a little bit more aggressive.
How would you remove him?
Well, first of all, he has to be removed through a combination of alternatives on the ground that are Syrians, not foreign fighters, not foreign forces. And again, this reminds me of one of those cage matches in professional wrestling where you have 18 different people in the ring, and sometimes they fight each other, and the two of them turn on somebody. You've got Hezbollah, you've got Iran, you've got obviously the Syrian forces, you've got the Russians, you've got multiple rebel groups that are not jihadists, then you have al-Nusra, which is an al-Qaeda group and their affiliates, and then you have ISIS, of course. So ultimately, I think you've got to have a Sunni, which is the majority in Syria, a Sunni non-jihadist alternative, which is what we should have done back in 2011, and I hope now the work will begin to carve out a space for them to be able to grow and get more powerful so they can be a clear alternative to Assad. Whatever happens, hopefully a political negotiation, not continued bloodshed.
Senator, the Syrian president has killed nearly 500,000 of his own people. 5 million Syrians have fled as refugees. He's gassed his own people, including children. Is bombing an airfield enough?
Well, in terms of retribution or punishment for what he's done, of course not. He's a war criminal, and he should be brought into international justice.
Are you concerned now, Senator, about a retaliatory strike of any kind?
From Syria?
Syria, Russia?
Yeah. Well, first of all, the Syrians don't have the capacity to retaliate against the United States other than perhaps doing asymmetrical things or a chemical attack, which is one of the things that we need to talk about is different from the past. You do now have hundreds of American troops as advisors on the ground helping to lead the fight against ISIS. If Assad is willing to use sarin gas against his own people, civilians, he's probably willing to use those against Americans.
Why do you think he thought he could get away with it?
Well, that's a good question. I think, number one, this is about regime survival. And so if they feel like they're losing territory as they were, that is critical to their survival, he's prepared to go all the way. He's got nowhere else to go. For him, it's a life or death situation. And the other, I think I would say, and I said this the other day, I do believe that when the sentiment is out there that somehow we have given up on efforts to remove him and that, in fact, he's going to stay, I do think it gave him license or perhaps an incentive to believe he could get away with something like this. I'm glad to see that that's changed.
You think specifically the comments by Secretary of State Tillerson gave him license?
Well, again, I'm not saying that's why Secretary Tillerson said it. I am saying that I do believe that it's not coincidental. That it's not coincidental that that he sees these statements out there and within a couple of days he takes action. The important point is that's not what they're saying anymore, and not just not what they're saying, it's not what they're doing. They made it very clear last night. And I will say this, I know where the president was on the campaign on these issues, but I don't think you could watch that press conference a couple days ago where he was standing next to the King of Jordan and not see that he was personally moved by the images and the news he got. There's a difference between being a candidate and being the president and having access to this information and the gravity of the office on your shoulders. And both last night in his statements and the day before in that press conference, I think you saw a person, a human being, our president, Donald Trump, who was deeply impacted, as we all were.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Senator. Pleasure to have you this morning.
Thank you.
In our next half hour, former CI Deputy Director.
Okay, sisters and brothers, I accidentally said I seen number 7 in the last few days, but it's been actually the last several months. And right now, we are in NISSAN 11, okay, which happens to be on the 7th of this month. I was looking at a thing on Putin, and he was also wearing a red tie. And I'm just like, there's something with these 7s and 11s that we're seeing, and I just pray you got your eyes open, be ready. I'm going to try and do a video later on some information that I have gathered. I love you all. This is NISSAN 11. This is something I wrote in, but today is the 7th. This is God's gift. I love you. Be blessed. Be covered in the Lord, people. I love you all. Bye. Oh, and this is all this here from the 10th to the 18th. This is our Passover. This is where our Jesus Christ died on Friday. And, we know 3 days later, he rose. So keep your eyes open, people. These are our seasons. I love you all. And I'll try and get that video out to you. Love you. Bye.